Hello everyone, Professor Helmling here. Just a short video here to unpack and work through one of the texts from our field guide, a short article called Write for Your Life by the novelist and memoirist Anna Quindlen. Now this is from 2007 and it refers to events in the earliest 20th century. And as you can see, is primarily focused on the release of a film called Freedom Writers, which you may or may not be familiar with. Now, this is one of the pieces in our textbook that is said to kind of mix genres, and we'll see how it does that as we read through it. So you will want to follow along with the essay, though it will be on the screen here as well. You probably want a copy in front of you. Like I said, it is in the field guide. If you're watching this video and don't yet have your field guide, then I will have provided you a link online so that you can read it online. So let's dive right into it. This was originally published in Newsweek, and she says, "The new movie Freedom Writers isn't entirely about the themes the trailers suggest. It isn't only about gang warfare and racial tensions and tolerance. It isn't only about the difference one good teacher can make in the life of one messed up kid. Freedom Writers is about the power of writing in the lives of ordinary people. That's a lesson everyone needs." The movie and the book from which it was taken track the education of a young teacher named Erin Gruel, who shows up shiny new to face a class of what are called in pedagogical jargon at-risk students. It's a mixed bag of Latino, Asian, and Black teenagers with one feckless white kid thrown in. They ignore, belittle, and dismiss her as she proffers lesson plans and reading materials seriously out of step with the homelessness, drug use, and violence that are the stuff of their precarious existences. And then one day, she gives them all marbled composition books and the assignment to write their lives, ungraded, unjudged, and the world breaks open. So here in her introduction, she identifies the movie Freedom Writers and the book it's based on. And really at this point in the essay, you'd be forgiven for thinking, oh, this is a review of that movie. Now, reviews are, of course, evaluation, one of the genres that we will work with in this class. And evaluations, if they're good, always involve analysis. So the fact that here at the beginning she's analyzing a theme from the movie, it shouldn't surprise us because good evaluation will always involve this analysis. So right now it looks very much like she's just reviewing the movie. There are a couple of clues, though, that her purpose is somewhat broader than that. For one thing, there's the title of the essay. And titles can, telegraph some stuff to us. We always want to look at titles carefully. In this case, it looks a little broader. She doesn't mention the movie in the title. Again, not a dead giveaway, but perhaps a suggestion that the theme is more general here. And if you look in the middle of the first paragraph, she says, that's a lesson everyone needs. So she's talking about the theme from this movie and saying it's something everyone needs. So let's see how, as she develops her piece, it grows beyond just being a review of the movie. Now, by the way, here at the end, she says, she gives them the marble composition books. They have to write about their lives. The world breaks open. And then what she gives us next are these quotes from those diaries. "My probation officer thinks he's slick. He swears he's an expert on gangs. Sorry, diary, I was going to try not to do it tonight, but the little baggie of white powder is calling my name. If you pull up my shirt sleeves and look at my arms, you'll see black and blue marks. The words eviction notice stopped me dead in my tracks. When I was younger, they would lock me up in the closet because they wanted to get high and beat up on each other." So powerful excerpts from these diaries showing the power of writing. Miss G, as the kids called her, embraced a concept that has been lost in modern life. Writing can make pain tolerable, confusion clearer, and the self stronger. So again, yes, we've got the particulars from this movie/book, but here she's taking it to a much broader, more general theme. And as we'll see, that's really her interest in this essay, in this article, is this more general theme. She's using Write for Her Life as a vehicle to do that. How is it, at a time when clarity and strength go begging, that we have moved so far from everyday prose? Social critics might trace this back to the demise of letter writing. The details of housekeeping and child-rearing, the rigors of war and work, advice to friends and family, none was slated for publication. They were communications that gave shape to everyday life. But as the letter fell out of favor and education became professionalized with its goal less the expansion of the mind than the acquisition of a job, writing began to be seen as largely as the purview of writers. Writing at work also became so stylistically removed from the story of our lives that the two seemed to have nothing in common. Corporate prose conformed to an equation: information times polysyllabic words plus tortured syntax equals aren't you impressed? Okay, let's look at these two paragraphs here because something strange has happened. Where are the freedom writers? They're completely gone. She's moved on from that example, and she's taken a shift. Now she's talking about the history of, in this case, letter writing, and how it represents a change in the way that people view writing. And then she expands on that by talking about how dull writing for work is, with this fun little image of how do we write for work? Oh, it's information times polysyllabic, big words, plus tortured syntax equals, isn't this impressive? This is something that I can relate to because I see my students trying to do this all the time. It's like, oh, I'm trying to impress the teacher with my big words and my tortured sentence structure to try to sound smart, and kind of misses the mark. So right there, Anna Quinlan's giving you a warning, and I'm going to second that warning. Don't try to do this in your writing. Don't try so hard to sound smart because you won't really impress anyone. Be direct and be clear in your communication. So she's moved away from the example that she started with into this digression where now she's talking about the history of letter writing and everything. Let's see where she goes from here. And in the age of the telephone, most communication became evanescent, gone into thin air, no matter how important or heartfelt. Think of all those people inside the World Trade Center saying goodbye by phone. If only in the blizzard of paper that followed the collapse of the building, a letter had fallen from the sky for every family member and friend. Something to hold on to, something to read and reread, something real. Words on paper confer a kind of immortality. Wouldn't all of us love to have a journal, a memoir, a letter from those we have loved and lost? Shouldn't all of us leave a little bit of that behind? Okay, so now she's building on, letter writing used to be a thing, but then with a telephone, we don't have that. And so, we don't have as many artifacts of our communication with our family members. And then she gets into this example of what if on September 11th, those people had been able to leave a letter for folks instead of just a quick phone call. Honestly, I really think that this appealing to 9/11 is kind of tired, if I can be evaluative for a moment. I guess in 2007 it didn't feel as stale, but now it feels kind of like a really obvious way to try to pull at the heartstrings. So Anna Quinlan, I'm not a big fan of this move that she makes. But that's how she's backing up her point. And notice we're still digressing. We're still talking about these general kind of things instead of the particulars of the Freedom Writers example. Now we will come back to the Freedom Writers though. But first she has a few more things to say about technology. The age of technology has both revived the use of writing and provided ever more reasons for its spiritual solace. Emails are letters, after all, more lasting than phone calls, even if many of them are too cursory for you. Now that's again an artifact of the time this was written. This is 2007, so that's kind of like text speak. Now we don't use text speak anymore. We don't have to use abbreviations because our phones have full keypads. They even have predictive text and all that good stuff. And the physical isolation they and other arm's-length cyber advances create makes talking to yourself more important than ever. That's also what writing is. Not just a legacy, but therapy. As the novelist Don DeLillo once said, writing is a form of personal freedom. It frees us from the mass identity we see in the making all around us. In the end, writers will write not to be outlaw heroes of some underculture, but mainly to save themselves, to survive as individuals. So notice that in this paragraph, she's continuing thinking about technology, but she makes a different point about the value of writing, which we're seeing now is her main thesis. She's arguing here, everybody needs writing. And so in the previous point, the point was, well, letter writing, was an artifact of your life, and it was a keepsake, a memory, a legacy, she says here. Here she's pointing out, though, it can also be therapeutic. It can benefit you. Okay, and so that theme of benefit kind of leads into the next point where she gets back to the Freedom Writers. Here she says, and notice also she uses a big name, Don DeLillo. Now, Anna Quindlen herself is an established novelist, certainly more famous than you or me for her writing. But Don DeLillo is a big name in literary writing. So by pulling him in, she's kind of giving herself a little bit more oomph on this point and using his quote. And so that's the one thing that we can do in our writing too. If you're making a kind of broad point like this, where you're not going to be able to pull in a lot of substantive evidence, for all of her talk about history, she's not bringing in statistics and a lot of hard facts. So how can you support an argument that doesn't have a lot of fact-based evidence to back it up? Well, you can bring in other perspectives. And here Don DeLillo serves that for her. So like I was saying, so all of that builds the point that writing is good for you. And so that leads her back to the Freedom Writers. That's exactly what Gruelle was after when she got the kids in her class writing in a program that's since been duplicated at other schools. Salvation and survival for teenagers whose chances of either seemed negligible. Growing up, I always assumed I would either drop out of school or get pregnant, one student wrote. So when Miss G started talking about college, it was like a foreign language to me. Maybe that's the moment when that Latina girl began to speak that foreign language, when she wrote those words down. Today, she has a college degree. One of the texts assigned by Erin Gruelle was The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. A student who balked at reading a book about someone so different, so remote, went on to write, "At the end of the book, I was so mad that Anne died, because as she was dying, a part of me was dying with her." Of course, Anne never dreamed her diary would be published, much less read by millions of people after her death at the hands of the Nazis. She wrote it for the same reason the kids who called themselves Freedom Writers wrote in those composition books, to make sense of themselves. That's not just for writers, that's for people. So here we see Quindlen coming back to her main point, that is, we all need writing. Okay? And so the Freedom Writers was really just a vehicle to make that point. So this isn't a review of Freedom Writers, though there are moves that do evaluation on the book and the movie, and do analysis on the book and the movie. Her main purpose is argumentative. She's saying, we need to write. All of us need writing, both as legacy and to understand ourselves and our place in the world. So again, it's a short article where she makes that point. I'm not a big fan of some of the moves she makes in here. I think going to Anne Frank and the Nazis is kind of cheap. I think using 9/11 is kind of cheap, but we can see her approach to this topic very clearly. And her structure is a little bit different than what you might expect, because as we said, she opens with Freedom Writers, and it feels like a review at first. Then she goes into this history of writing, talking both about letter writing, then technology. She makes that 9/11 point. And then she comes back to Gruelle and the Freedom Writers and talks about the example of the college-bound student and also about the Diary of Anne Frank. And so she has an interesting structure to make these points, even if I'm not a big fan of all the examples she uses. So I think it's a good tool for us to use for learning about structure and looking at the choices she makes with evidence here, and the way that she mixes genres, because we have some evaluation, we have some analysis, but I think it's mostly an argument about writing. So that's a quick breakdown of Quindlen's Write for Your Life. This will help you in your analysis coming up. So thank you for your attention, and we'll see you next time.